In the spring of 1945, as World War II drew to a close, German prisoners of war found themselves dispersed across the United States, far from the battlefields of Europe. Among these locations was Camp Dermott, located in the southeastern corner of Arkansas. Established in 1943, Camp Dermott was designed to house approximately 3,000 German POWs and was part of the larger network of camps across the United States, managed by the War Department and overseen by the U.S. Army Provost Marshal General. The layout of Camp Dermott conformed to standard military specifications, including barracks, mess halls, recreational areas, and guard towers. The camp was secured by a contingent of American military police whose duties included maintaining order and overseeing the daily activities of the prisoners. While the camp itself was a microcosm of military organization, the treatment of the POWs reflected a distinct departure from the wartime practices seen in Nazi Germany. The logistics of POW labor were meticulously documented in War Department circulars and transportation logs. German prisoners were utilized primarily for agricultural labor, contributing to the region's farming needs by working in cotton fields, orchards, and vegetable farms. In addition to agriculture, prisoners were employed in canneries, lumber yards, and occasionally in grocery stores and factories. These assignments were conducted under the terms of agricultural labor contracts that specified working hours, wages, and conditions. Under the Geneva Conventions, POWs were entitled to compensation for their labor. In Arkansas, this was provided in the form of coupons that could be used to purchase goods from the camp canteen. The canteen offered a selection of basic commodities reflecting wartime rationing policies that were in effect for civilians and military personnel alike. Food systems within the camp ensured that prisoners received meals at scheduled times, adhering to nutritional standards monitored by Red Cross inspections. The presence of German POWs in Arkansas elicited a range of responses from the local civilian population. Newspaper articles and recorded incidents from the period reveal a mix of curiosity, apprehension, and indifference. Some civilians viewed the POWs as a source of labor that alleviated wartime shortages, while others expressed concern about security and the potential influence of enemy soldiers in their communities. However, the overall atmosphere was one of pragmatic acceptance, shaped by the necessities of the time. Discipline within the camp followed military protocols. Violations of camp rules were addressed through a system of reprimands and, in severe cases, confinement in the camp stockade. The camp's medical facilities provided access to health care, with treatment records indicating that POWs received medical attention comparable to that available to American soldiers. Mail and communication with families in Germany were facilitated under the supervision of the International Red Cross, ensuring that prisoners remained connected to their homeland despite the distance. Educational programs and recreational activities were organized with the assistance of the YMCA, which provided materials and resources for classes in language, mathematics, and technical skills. These programs were part of a broader initiative to engage prisoners constructively during their internment and prepare them for eventual repatriation. As the war in Europe ended, the focus shifted to the post-war repatriation and re-education of German POWs. Directives issued by the War Department outlined the procedures for returning prisoners to Germany, a process that would extend over several years due to logistical challenges and the need to rebuild war-torn Europe. During this period, re-education programs were introduced, emphasizing democratic ideals and the reconstruction of German society along non-militaristic lines. In early 1945, a group of German POWs from Camp Dermott was assigned to repair plumbing in a nearby county jail. This assignment, though mundane in nature, offered the prisoners a glimpse into the American legal system an experience that contrasted sharply with their own wartime detentions. As they worked, the POWs observed detainees awaiting trial, reading newspapers, and receiving meals in a structured environment. Conversations between officers and the detainees revolved around court dates and bail, processes that were administrative and governed by paperwork rather than fear or coercion. For the German POWs, accustomed to a system where detention was often political or military, the American county jail presented an unexpected perspective on justice and incarceration. This encounter, observed through the lens of their labor assignment, illustrated a fundamental ideological dismantling, achieved not through overt indoctrination, but through the routines and systems they encountered in their daily lives. The story of German POWs in Arkansas and their experiences both inside and outside the confines of Camp Dermott forms a chapter in the broader history of World War II. It reflects the complexities of wartime and post-war interactions, the adaptation of individuals to new environments, and the gradual unfolding of ideological shifts that occurred far from the theaters of conflict. This narrative, supported by archival records, underscores the multifaceted nature of history and the enduring impact of seemingly ordinary events. The experience of German prisoners of war, POWs, in American county jails during World War II presents a fascinating case study of cultural and ideological exchange. These German soldiers, accustomed to the authoritarian systems back home, found themselves immersed in an environment that was fundamentally different from what they had known. The War Department, responsible for the oversight of POWs in the United States, was keenly aware of the potential for these interactions to serve as a conduit for introducing democratic ideals. As a result, they orchestrated an experience that was as much about re-education as it was about detention. Upon arrival at the county jail, the German POWs were immediately struck by the procedural nature of the American incarceration system. In Germany, wartime detentions often came with an air of unpredictability, with individuals sometimes taken into custody for political or military reasons without clear justification. In contrast, the American system was rooted in the principles of due process and transparency. Every arrest required thorough documentation, and detainees were ensured the right to legal representation and timely court hearings. This was a stark departure from the arbitrary and often secretive detentions many of these POWs were used to in Nazi Germany. The county jail operated with a distinct emphasis on routine and order. Mealtimes were scheduled and adhered to with precision, ensuring that every detainee received adequate nutrition and care. For the German POWs, this was a noticeable divergence from the often harsh and resource-scarce conditions they had experienced during wartime back home. In Germany, prisoners' well-being was frequently a secondary concern, overshadowed by the broader demands of the war effort. In the United States, however, the well-being of detainees was integrated into the broader framework of justice and human rights. As the POWs went about their daily tasks, such as working on the plumbing, they often overheard conversations between officers discussing court dates and bail arrangements. These discussions provided a window into the intricacies of the American legal system. The concept of bail, in particular, was an eye-opener for many of the POWs. It represented a belief in the presumption of innocence and provided detainees the opportunity for temporary freedom while awaiting trial. This was a novel concept for the German POWs, accustomed to a system where guilt was often presumed and punishment swift. The presence of organizations like the Red Cross and the YMCA further underscored the humanitarian approach of the American detention system. These organizations were instrumental in monitoring the conditions within POW camps, advocating for the humane treatment of prisoners, and facilitating educational programs designed to introduce democratic principles. For the German POWs, participation in these programs was both an opportunity and a challenge. The educational initiatives covered a range of topics, from democratic governance and human rights to non-militaristic values. The goal was to counteract the militaristic ideologies that had been deeply ingrained in these soldiers over years of conflict. While the ideological shift among the POWs was neither immediate nor uniform, the cumulative impact of these experiences was undeniable. Some POWs began to question the ideologies they had once regarded as sacrosanct, while others remained steadfast in their beliefs. Nonetheless, the exposure to American systems of justice and administration laid the groundwork for a more nuanced understanding of governance and individual rights. This gradual ideological evolution, though largely unintended, was a significant byproduct of their detention in the United States. The local civilian population in Arkansas had varied reactions to the presence of German POWs in their midst. For some, the POWs were a source of unease and suspicion, representing potential security risks in a time of war. However, for others, the POWs were seen as a valuable labor force, particularly in the agricultural sector, where labor shortages were a pressing concern. This pragmatic acceptance fostered interactions between civilians and POWs that were largely cordial and devoid of animosity. The presence of German POWs became woven into the fabric of the local historical narrative, leaving an indelible mark on the community's collective memory. As the war drew to a close and the focus shifted to the repatriation of POWs, the War Department, in collaboration with international organizations, devised comprehensive plans for the reintegration of these individuals into post-war society. The educational programs that had been a staple of the POW experience in the United States played a crucial role in this effort. By emphasizing democratic governance, human rights, and non-militaristic values, these programs aim to equip returning POWs with the knowledge and skills necessary to contribute positively to a peaceful post-war Europe. The impact of these experiences on the German POWs was multifaceted. While some remained resolute in their beliefs, others began to reevaluate the ideologies that had once seemed unassailable. The exposure to American systems of justice and administration, combined with the educational initiatives, facilitated a more complex understanding of governance and individual rights. This ideological transformation was not just a personal journey for many of the POWs, but also a broader reflection of the shifting dynamics in post-war international relations and cultural exchanges. In the years following the war, the experiences of the German POWs in the United States became a subject of interest for historians and scholars. These experiences provided valuable insights into the ideological and cultural exchanges that occurred during this pivotal era. The POWs' observations of the American legal and administrative systems, coupled with the educational programs they participated in, contributed to a broader understanding of the complexities of wartime and post-war interactions. The story of the German POWs in Arkansas serves as a microcosm of the larger historical narrative of World War II and its aftermath. It illustrates the potential for ideological transformation and the role of exposure to democratic ideals in shaping post-war societies. While the immediate impact of these experiences on individual POWs varied, the broader implications for international relations and cultural exchange were profound and enduring. In conclusion, the experiences of German POWs in Arkansas during 1945 reflect the intricate interplay between wartime necessity and ideological evolution. Their exposure to American systems of justice, facilitated by the War Department and supported by organizations such as the Red Cross and YMCA, offered a unique perspective on governance and individual rights. As these POWs were repatriated and reintegrated into post-war society, the lessons they learned in the United States contributed to the gradual ideological shifts that characterized the post-war era. The story of these POWs remains a testament to the transformative power of exposure to democratic ideals and the enduring impact of cross-cultural interactions in times of conflict and beyond. As the German prisoners of war, POWs, continued their work at the county jail, they found themselves immersed in an environment that was markedly different from what they had known. The stark yet orderly interior of the jail was characterized by a routine that emphasized structure and predictability, providing a semblance of normalcy in a world that had been turned upside down by war. The American military police, tasked with escorting the POWs through the hallways, maintained a cordial yet authoritative presence, reflecting the disciplined yet humane approach of the American military justice system. This environment was a far cry from the settings of wartime Germany, where detention was often synonymous with fear, political oppression, and a pervasive sense of uncertainty. Upon entering the facility, the POWs were struck by the sight of detainees engaged in various activities. Some inmates were absorbed in reading newspapers, a testament to the relatively free flow of information within the facility. In a place where one might expect silence and isolation, the presence of newspapers served as a medium for information and education, indicative of the rights afforded to those awaiting trial. This access to information contrasted sharply with the POW camps in Germany, where media was tightly controlled and often used as a tool for propaganda. In those camps, the German soldiers had grown accustomed to a steady stream of state-sanctioned narratives that left little room for independent thought or dissenting opinions. The POWs also noted the regular distribution of meals, which were provided at scheduled intervals. This adherence to routine reflected the administrative nature of the facility, where detainees were treated with a level of dignity and respect in accordance with American judicial principles. The meals, though simple, were sufficient and consistent, standing in stark contrast to the often meager rations distributed in the German detention system. In Germany, food shortages and logistical challenges had frequently resulted in inadequate nutrition for prisoners, compounding the harsh conditions of their confinement. As they continued their repairs, the POWs overheard conversations among officers regarding court dates and bail. These discussions were matter-of-fact, focusing on logistical and procedural elements of the legal process. The concept of bail, allowing individuals to secure temporary release pending trial through monetary assurance, was foreign to many of the German soldiers. In their home country, detention was often indefinite, with little recourse for those accused of political or military offenses. The American legal system's emphasis on due process, where individuals were presumed innocent until proven guilty, was a significant departure from the practices in Nazi Germany. There, the legal system often operated under the presumption of guilt, particularly for political dissidents and those deemed enemies of the state. The POW's exposure to these principles of justice and fairness was a subtle yet profound element of the re-education program overseen by the War Department. The presence of organizations such as the Red Cross and YMCA within the jail underscored the commitment to humane treatment and the rights of detainees. These organizations played critical roles in monitoring conditions, ensuring compliance with international standards, and providing educational opportunities. Their involvement in the jail mirrored their activities in the POW camps, where they facilitated cultural and educational programs designed to expose German soldiers to democratic ideals and practices. For the POWs, the experience at the county jail was both enlightening and thought-provoking. It challenged their preconceived notions of justice and governance, prompting some to question the ideologies they had once accepted without reservation. The structured yet fair environment of the jail, coupled with the administrative nature of the detention process, stood in stark contrast to the militaristic and often arbitrary systems they had known in Germany. As they returned to Camp Dermott, the POWs carried with them a new understanding of American society and its legal framework. This exposure was a critical component of the War Department's broader efforts to instill democratic values and prepare the POWs for eventual repatriation. While the impact of these experiences varied among individuals, the overarching theme of ideological exchange and transformation remained central to the narrative of German POWs in America. The War Department's approach to re-education was multifaceted, encompassing not only exposure to American legal and administrative systems, but also cultural and educational initiatives. Classes in English language, history, and civics were offered, providing POWs with the tools necessary to engage with democratic principles and participate in post-war society. These programs aimed to dismantle militaristic ideologies and foster a more nuanced understanding of governance and individual rights. By learning about the founding principles of democracy, the separation of powers, and the rights enshrined in the American Constitution, the POWs were encouraged to think critically about their own nation's governance and the values that should guide a just society. The local civilian population played an ancillary role in this process, often interacting with the POWs during their work assignments in agriculture and infrastructure. While some civilians remained wary of the security risks posed by the POWs, others recognized the value of these exchanges in promoting mutual understanding and cooperation. The POWs' labor, seen as a contribution to the war effort, further facilitated this cultural exchange, providing opportunities for dialogue and interaction. Through these interactions, both the POWs and the local residents were able to gain insight into each other's cultures, breaking down barriers of mistrust and prejudice. As the end of the war approached, the question of repatriation loomed large. For many POWs, the prospect of returning to a war-torn Germany was fraught with uncertainty. The ideological shifts experienced during their time in America would play a critical role in shaping their reintegration into German society. For some, the exposure to democratic ideals and practices prompted a reevaluation of their beliefs, while others remained steadfast in their pre-war ideologies. The experience of living under a system that valued individual rights and due process left a lasting impression on many POWs, influencing their perspectives on governance and justice long after they returned to Germany. The long-term effects of these experiences on the POWs and their subsequent societal roles remain a subject of historical inquiry. The War Department's efforts to promote ideological transformation through exposure to democratic systems and principles were part of a broader strategy to influence post-war reconstruction and governance. The extent to which these efforts succeeded and the degree to which individual POWs embraced democratic ideals continues to be debated among historians. Some POWs returned to Germany with a newfound appreciation for democratic governance, actively participating in the rebuilding of their nation, while others struggled to reconcile their experiences in America with the realities of post-war Germany. Ultimately, the story of German POWs in America is one of ideological exchange and transformation, set against the backdrop of a world in transition. The experiences of these soldiers, as they navigated the complexities of a foreign legal system and encountered democratic principles firsthand, provide a lens through which to examine the broader themes of justice, governance, and cultural exchange. The contrasts between American and German detention systems serve as a powerful reminder of the ideological divides that defined the wartime era and the potential for change through exposure and education. In the end, the journey of these POWs highlights the enduring power of ideas and the capacity for transformation, even in the most challenging of circumstances. The story of the German POWs at Camp Dermott is not just a tale of captivity during one of history's most tumultuous periods, but also a narrative of cultural exchange and transformation. The prisoners found themselves in an environment remarkably different from the rigid authoritarianism that had defined their homeland. As they navigated life within the camp and interacted with the broader American societal systems, they encountered a world governed by principles starkly different from those they had been accustomed to under Nazi rule. Upon their arrival at Camp Dermott, the German POWs were immediately confronted with the physical and ideological contrasts of their new environment. The camp itself, though surrounded by fences and guarded, did not exude the oppressive aura of fear and brutality they might have expected. Instead, it functioned with an administrative efficiency that prioritized order and discipline, yet allowed for a level of humane treatment that was surprising to many of the soldiers. The camp's operations reflected a broader American commitment to rules and procedures, a theme that would become even more evident as the POWs engaged with the justice system. One of the most eye-opening experiences for the POWs was their exposure to the American approach to legal proceedings and incarceration. Their work on plumbing repairs at the county jail offered them a unique vantage point to observe a justice system fundamentally different from the arbitrary and draconian systems they knew in Germany. Here they saw detainees engaging in activities that suggested a semblance of normalcy, such as reading newspapers, playing cards, or simply conversing freely with one another. Meals were provided at regular intervals, and the detainees' treatment was governed by a set of rules that emphasized fairness and order. The POWs were particularly struck by the procedural nature of the American legal system. They learned about scheduled court dates, the right to legal representation, and the option of bail, all of which underscored a system predicated on the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. This stood in stark contrast to the practices in Nazi Germany, where detentions were often politically motivated, and the concept of a fair trial was frequently disregarded. The American justice system's emphasis on administrative processes and procedural adherence was a revelation to the German soldiers, who were accustomed to a system where power dynamics often overshadowed legal formalities. In addition to observing the legal system, the POWs also noted the presence of organizations such as the Red Cross and YMCA, which played a significant role in their daily lives. These organizations facilitated not only the material well-being of the POWs, but also engaged them in educational programs that introduced democratic values and principles. The War Department's initiative to rehabilitate German POWs was part of a broader effort to prepare them for reintegration into a post-war society that would embrace democratic governance. The educational programs offered to the POWs were comprehensive and thought-provoking. Lectures and discussions covered a wide range of topics, from civic responsibility to the functioning of democratic institutions. The POWs were encouraged to participate in debates and were exposed to various perspectives that challenged their pre-existing beliefs. Initially met with skepticism, these interactions gradually fostered a degree of openness among some POWs to alternative political ideologies. This exposure to democratic principles was intended to plant the seeds of change, encouraging the POWs to reconsider their worldviews. The contrast between the American and German systems extended beyond the confines of the jail and the camp. As the war drew to a close, the local civilian population, initially wary of the POWs, began to interact more openly with them. These interactions provided additional insights into the American way of life and further underscored the differences in societal structures. The POWs observed a society where individual rights were protected and where community involvement played a crucial role in governance. They saw people freely expressing their opinions, engaging in political discourse, and participating in community events. As the war ended, the focus shifted to repatriating the POWs and reintegrating them into the fabric of a post-war Germany. The War Department's educational efforts had laid the groundwork for this transition, instilling in the POWs a foundational understanding of democratic principles. However, the extent to which these experiences would influence post-war German society remained uncertain. The process of repatriation was meticulous, involving a comprehensive review of each POW's conduct and ideological alignment. The War Department, in collaboration with the Red Cross, ensured that the returning POWs were equipped with both practical skills and an understanding of democratic values. This preparation was seen as essential for the reconstruction of a Germany that would align with the broader objectives of peace and stability in Europe. In the months following their return, these former POWs began to contribute to the rebuilding of Germany, bringing with them the lessons learned during their captivity. While not all embraced democratic ideals wholeheartedly, the exposure to alternative systems of governance had undoubtedly left an indelible mark on their perspectives. This ideological shift, though subtle, played a role in shaping the post-war narrative of Germany's transformation from a militaristic state to a fledgling democracy. The POWs' experiences in America had opened their eyes to new ways of thinking about governance, justice, and the role of the individual in society. Historical analyses of this period have highlighted the significance of the POWs' experiences in America as part of a larger narrative of cultural and ideological exchange. The interactions with American systems and institutions provided a glimpse into a world governed by principles of justice and equality, challenging the authoritarian paradigms that had dominated their lives. The legacy of this exchange is reflected in the broader historiographical discourse on post-war Germany. Scholars have debated the extent to which the POWs' exposure to democratic ideals influenced the country's subsequent political evolution. While it is difficult to quantify the impact of these experiences, it is clear that they contributed to a more nuanced understanding of governance and justice among those who had been directly exposed to them. In conclusion, the German POWs' experiences in America during the final stages of World War II represent a microcosm of the transformative power of exposure to democratic systems. The contrast between American and German approaches to justice and incarceration highlighted fundamental differences in ideological frameworks. These experiences, facilitated by organizations such as the Red Cross and YMCA, played a role in the gradual ideological shift among some POWs, contributing to the broader narrative of post-war reconstruction and democratization in Germany. While the full extent of this transformation remains a subject of historical inquiry, the POWs' time in America undoubtedly left an imprint on their understanding of justice and governance, shaping their contributions to the post-war German state. The story of the German POWs at Camp Dermott is a testament to the power of cultural exchange and the enduring influence of democratic ideals in shaping the future. The German POWs at Camp Dermott experienced a return to Germany that was marked by a complex blend of anticipation and uncertainty. As the repatriation process unfolded, the logistical challenges of transporting thousands of individuals across the Atlantic were meticulously managed by the War Department in coordination with international organizations such as the Red Cross. The return journey was both a physical and symbolic transition, marking the end of their time in the United States and the beginning of their reintegration into a nation grappling with the aftermath of war. Upon their arrival in a war-ravaged Germany, the former POWs faced a country in the throes of reconstruction. The ideological seeds planted during their internment in America began to take root in various ways. Some individuals, influenced by their exposure to democratic ideals and systems of justice, found themselves drawn to the emerging democratic structures within the new German government. They participated in local governance, contributing to the rebuilding efforts with a perspective shaped by their experiences abroad. Others, while perhaps less overtly engaged in political life, nonetheless carried with them a broader understanding of justice and governance that informed their interactions within their communities. The educational initiatives and exposure to American systems of governance had instilled in many POWs a recognition of the importance of individual rights and the rule of law. These concepts, once foreign, became part of a framework that informed their views on leadership and civic responsibility. As Germany embarked on its journey toward democratization, the contributions of these individuals, informed by their time in America, played a role in the cultural and political shifts that characterized the post-war period. Historical assessments of this era underscore the multifaceted nature of the POW's ideological transformation. While not all embraced the democratic ideals they encountered, the cumulative impact of their experiences in American POW camps and county jails contributed to a broader dialogue on governance and justice. The presence of German POWs in the United States and the subsequent ideological shifts among some of them reflect the potential for cross-cultural interactions to influence post-war societies. In the years that followed, the legacy of these German POWs became intertwined with the larger narrative of Germany's recovery and reintegration into the international community. Their experiences in America, characterized by exposure to democratic systems and humanitarian principles, provided a foundation for understanding and engaging with the democratic processes that would come to define post-war German society. As historians continue to explore the nuances of this period, the story of the German POWs at Camp Dermott remains a testament to the enduring impact of cross-cultural exchange and the transformative power of democratic ideals in shaping the course of history.